The email showed up on a Monday morning, and I almost ignored it. It looked like another routine reminder, until I saw the words that changed my week. Backflow testing and fire protection compliance was overdue, and the county wanted it completed before the deadline. I manage several apartment buildings in Miami-Dade, so there is always something competing for my attention. But after one failed inspection a few years ago, I promised myself I would never let fire protection paperwork become an emergency again. That's why I reached out to Florida Fire Solutions. If you own or manage property in Miami, Broward, Palm Beach, or anywhere in South Florida, you know that backflow testing, annual inspections, fire sprinkler compliance, and documentation are not things you can afford to put off. I've been a property manager for more than 10 years, and one thing I've learned is that most tenants never notice the systems that quietly protect them every day. People see fresh paint, new landscaping, or remodeled hallways. Almost nobody notices the fire sprinkler riser room or the backflow preventer sitting outside the building. The funny thing is, those hidden systems become everyone's concern the moment something isn't right. A few years ago, I inherited one of our apartment properties from another manager. Everything looked organized at first glance. The inspection binders were on the shelf, the mechanical room looked clean, and every valve appeared to be in place. I assumed we were in good shape until I started comparing inspection dates with the county requirements. That's when I realized our backflow testing records weren't current, and nobody could tell me whether the reports had actually been submitted after the previous inspection. I didn't want to wait until an inspector pointed it out, so I called Florida Fire Solutions. From the first conversation, I could tell they understood exactly what I was dealing with. Instead of only asking how many backflow preventers we had, they wanted to know about the fire sprinkler system, previous testing history, and whether the county had already issued a notice. It felt less like scheduling an appointment and more like building a plan to make sure everything stayed compliant. The technicians arrived on time and immediately got to work. What impressed me was how methodical the process was. They didn't rush through the testing just to generate paperwork. They carefully isolated the assembly, connected their calibrated testing equipment, checked each check valve, verified pressure readings, and documented every result. As they worked, they explained what they were doing and why each step mattered. Unfortunately, one of the backflow assemblies didn't pass the test. I remember my stomach dropping because I assumed that meant replacing the entire assembly. Instead, the technician calmly explained that many failed tests are caused by worn internal components that can often be repaired without replacing the complete unit. That was something I had never been told before. Florida Fire Solutions explained the deficiency in simple language and showed me exactly which check valve wasn't holding properly. There was no guessing and no vague explanation. They documented the results, explained the repair options, completed the necessary work, and performed another test afterward. This time, everything passed. They also handled the paperwork so the proper testing reports could be submitted, which saved me from another administrative headache. That experience taught me something important about preventive maintenance. Most people don't think about a backflow preventer until it fails an annual test. In reality, regular testing helps identify small issues before they become expensive repairs or compliance problems. Waiting until something breaks usually costs more than staying ahead of maintenance. As we talked during the inspection, I also learned how closely backflow testing connects with overall fire protection compliance. A fire sprinkler system depends on a reliable water supply, and the backflow prevention assembly plays an important role in protecting the public water system. The technician explained that fire sprinkler inspection and testing requirements are generally covered under NFPA 25, while local water authorities also require certified backflow testing and proper documentation. It isn't just about satisfying one agency. Multiple requirements work together to keep both the fire protection system and the water supply operating safely. Another lesson I learned is that paperwork matters almost as much as the inspection itself. A completed test doesn't help much if nobody can produce the report later. Florida Fire Solutions provided organized documentation showing the testing results, repairs that were completed, certification details, and recommendations for future maintenance. Everything was easy to file, and when our records were reviewed later, there were no questions because every document was already in order. Since then, I've noticed how many building owners accidentally create their own compliance issues. Some assume the water department automatically schedules testing. Others don't realize repairs require a retest before the assembly is considered compliant. Sometimes property managers inherit buildings without verifying inspection history, and they don't discover missing reports until an annual inspection or insurance review. I was fortunate to catch our issue before it became something more serious. Now, I keep a calendar for every fire protection inspection at our properties. Fire sprinkler inspections, fire extinguisher service, backflow testing, and other required maintenance are all scheduled well before they're due. That one change has eliminated the last-minute panic that used to happen every year. Looking back, that reminder email ended up being one of the best things that could have happened. It forced me to understand a system I had overlooked for years. More importantly, it reminded me that fire protection isn't just about passing inspections. It's about making sure critical equipment is ready when people depend on it. Whenever another property manager asks who we use for backflow testing, I tell them about that experience. Florida Fire Solutions communicated clearly, explained every step, corrected the deficiency without unnecessary delays, handled the documentation professionally, and made the entire backflow testing and fire protection compliance process much easier than I expected. After working with them, I stopped thinking of these inspections as paperwork and started seeing them as an important part of protecting both the property and the people who live there. That's why I'd confidently recommend Florida Fire Solutions to anyone responsible for keeping a commercial property or apartment building compliant.